Good evening and welcome to Arizona Illustrated for Tuesday, the 29th of May, 2012. Voters in southern Arizona are getting a chance to pick the new congressman who will replace former Representative Gabrielle Giffords in Congressional District 8. It's a very competitive race, and candidates and their supporters are turning to an onslaught of advertisements for help. Next, political reporter Christopher Conover interviews political communications professor KAET Kenski about the role and possible effect of these ads on the different campaigns.
Joining us now in the studio is Dr. KAET Kenski from the University of Arizona. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
As we get closer to Election Day, our mailboxes, our TVs are being flooded with ads, our radios, the internet, everything. So you and I are going to talk about a few of the things that we're all seeing and about their effectiveness. Let's take a look at a couple of ads. Let's begin with this pro-Ron Barber, anti-Jesse Kelly ad.
Jesse Kelly has some radical ideas.
We must get the corporate tax rate to 0.
And what about us?
The fair tax, this 23% consumption tax. I would vote for the fair tax.
Jesse Kelly, zero taxes for corporations, a 23% sales tax on us. Ron Barber says balance the budget the right way, cut taxes for the middle class, and protect Medicare.
I'm Ron Barber, and I approve this message because it's time to put the middle class first.
That's our first ad. As we said, that's an anti-Jesse Kelly, pro-Ron Barber ad. As someone who looks at political communications, what do you see in this ad?
Well, I would say that this is a standard issue attack ad that gets to the heart of one of the most important issues in this upcoming election, which is, of course, taxes, as particularly related to the economy. As people are feeling stretched from the economy, that's been one of the most important issues, and taxes is certainly related to that. This is a standard ad. It's a classic comparison ad, and it is one of those ads that is nicely done in the sense that the character attacks have not been made. It's stuck to certain issues. Now, those issues, of course, can be contested among the candidates as they sort through what evidence they use to support their facts.
All right, let's take, in an interest of fairness, a look at a pro-Jesse Kelly, anti-Ron Barber ad. This one comes not from the Kelly campaign, but from the National Republican Party.
Higher taxes and more lost jobs. That's what we'll get if we let Ron Barber rubber stamp the Obama-Pelosi agenda. Barber supported Obamacare, which raises our taxes by $500 billion. The law's high costs are stopping small businesses from hiring. A recent study warns that private sector employment could be reduced by 249,000 jobs. Rubber stamp Ron Barber. Higher taxes, more lost jobs. The National Republican Congressional Committee is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Okay, that ad actually, again, an anti-Ron Barber ad, doesn't mention Jesse Kelly because this is a national ad that has come in and branded Ron Barber as rubber stamp Ron Barber. So again, as a communications person, political communications person, what do you see in this ad?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to recognize that when groups come in and they attack one of the candidates, oftentimes people, even when it's mentioned who is sponsoring that ad, don't necessarily process it that way. And so most people probably won't make the distinction that this is from the Republican National Committee, not from Jesse Kelly. And so that's one thing important to recognize. The other thing is the emphasis on jobs. One of the things that has been hard-hitting in Arizona has been the issue of jobs. And so, again, they're choosing one of the most salient issues to our region and connecting the two. Now, one question is to what extent is Ron Barber responsible for jobs loss when he hasn't been in an elected position to make decisions and take responsibility for those actions. And so that's, I think, a question. We'll see how people end up processing it. In terms of where Ron Barber stands, it is a clear attack, and it should make people at least understand where the candidates are separated.
Okay, our third ad, again from the Nationals, this one from the National Democrats, and obviously an anti-Jesse Kelly ad. Let's take a look at that one.
Is Jesse Kelly listening to you? Was Jesse Kelly listening to you when he said on Social Security, "I'd love to eliminate the program"? Jesse Kelly said he would work to eliminate Medicare over time. Was he listening to you then? How about when Jesse Kelly said at the same time he'd cut taxes in half for millionaires? Is Jesse Kelly listening to you? Just listen to Jesse Kelly. The Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee is responsible for the content of this advertisement.
Okay, this, of course, an anti-Jesse Kelly ad, again paid for by an outside group, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Not directly a Ron Barber-sponsored ad, but definitely an anti-Jesse Kelly ad. What did you see here?
A couple things. First of all, the claims made about Jesse Kelly in this ad, as in many of the attacks coming from the Democrats as well as from the Barber campaign, have to do with statements that Jesse Kelly made back in 2009 and 2010. And so it's really going after him on some things that he said. Now, since that time, he's rephrased some of his positions, and so there has been further clarification, and there'll be a question as to whether or not people believe that the statements as representing Jesse Kelly or not. Now, in Ron Barber's favor when it comes to this type of ad is 2010 was an incredibly contentious race between Kelly and Giffords, and since special elections tend to focus on people who are already strong partisans, people will remember what was said in 2010 in terms of who was likely to turn out for that special election. So this is designed to go after those those who remember those 2010 claims, and they will hopefully get the people to the poll. That's the goal.
Okay, our final ad will be a pro-Jesse Kelly ad, and this one, like when we began, will be a local ad. Let's take a look.
Arizona families are struggling with the high cost of energy, and Ron Barber is making it worse. Ron Barber supports Obama's cap-and-trade bill. That would increase energy costs by almost $1,000 per Arizona family and cost up to 40,000 jobs here. Arizona families can't afford Ron Barber.
I'm Jesse Kelly, and I approve this message. Check out my plan for American energy independence at votejessekelly.com.
Jesse Kelly for Congress.
Okay, our final TV ad, pro-Jesse, starts with the ominous music and pictures of Ron, kind of grainy, and then the uplifting, very clear picture, uplifting music, very clear pictures of Jesse. What else do we see going on here?
Well, one thing is important to realize about this type of ad, it's called a contrast ad, where you either do the first half pro for the candidate sponsoring it, or like this started out with going off of the attack. And these tend to be very memorable ads because people can get a clear picture of the two sides. Now, whether or not those pictures are fair is, of course, up to the eye of the beholder. Clearly, visually, much more positive for Jesse Kelly. Not a whole lot of details on what he stands for, but at least directing people to his website to get more information. Going after Ron Barber. Again, the question will be, will people hold Ron Barber accountable when he wasn't in office at the time that these things went through Congress? He was part, of course, of Gabrielle Giffords' staff, but should we hold him responsible for what the Democrats passed through?
Before we move on to mailers, let me ask you this about these TV ads in general. Do they seem as though they're well-done, effective ads, or are they the type of things that only you and I and some people who really watch this stuff will end up sitting and talking about?
I don't know how much people will actually talk about these ads. I will say that these are fairly standard ads. The production value actually for congressional ads is pretty good. Don't know if this is just a sign of the times of people becoming more familiar with video editing, but the production value, I think, on all of them is good. Now, whether or not people agree with the claims is a completely different matter. Again, with it being a special election, we're talking about trying to mobilize partisans. For the most part in special elections, the independents tend not to appear.
Okay, let's take a look at some of these mailers. My mailbox has been filled with mailers from both sides. This first one is what I think is the largest mailer I've gotten, and it is from the Democratic Party of Arizona. Talk a little bit about this. What did you see when you took a look at this mailer?
So one thing that I'll tell you I liked about this mailer, and that I wish all television ads and mailers did, which is document where they get the claims from. The one thing, though, again, with this, as we saw with the ads, are that a lot of the claims against Jesse Kelly are based on a couple of statements that he made in 2009 and 2010. We know that candidates over time tend to change how they see things, especially if they're new to the process. And the question is, to what extent will people in CD8 hold Jesse accountable, see him as the same candidate in 2010 that he is now in 2012?
Also, we'll start with the Democratic ads, and then we'll go to the Republican ads for our viewers. This one, again, going after Jesse Kelly, but it particularly targeting women. This was mailed to a household with a couple in it, but it was addressed not to the family, but to the woman living in the house.
This is an incredibly important demographic for Democrats. Democrats tend to do better with women, generally speaking, more men to identify with the Republican Party. Why this is important is because although we know that 90% of Democrats tend to vote for the Democrat, 90% of Republicans tend to vote for the Republican, in 2010, one of the reasons why Jesse Kelly lost was because he lost among Republican women. There's a lot of diversity inside the Republican Party. Not all Republicans are the same, and Republican women are one of the groups that Jesse Kelly did not do as well with. So by targeting not just abortion, but being opposed to all forms of an abortion is a claim that can resonate with women. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that Republican women would then vote for Barber, but they might decide not to go to the polls. Okay, and the last one is kind of a feel-good piece, I guess, an introduction to Democratic candidate Ron Barber. Yes, that is one of the few advocacy pieces that we've seen. And again, typically just trying to introduce people. So it's particularly effective among people who aren't strong partisans. Strong partisans are going to know who Barber is. Strong partisans are going to know who Jesse Kelly is. This type of mailer, effective normally for a first run to get people to know the candidate. Those type of mailers are going to be incredibly important, I would say, more so in the fall than right now since of the focus on the special election. In the fall, we'll want to mobilize both sides will want to mobilize independent voters, and so mailers like this are incredibly important. Okay, let's switch over to the Republican side now. This is one that's been making the rounds, and you said even though this is a Republican mailer, it's a very tried and true tactic the way this is set up. This is, and we also saw this in the Democratic ads going against Jesse Kelly for the television ads. What this piece tries to do visually is link Barber with Obama and Nancy Pelosi, both figures that are not particularly popular with independents or Republicans. One visual technique to shortcut is to pair a candidate with people from that party who don't have particularly high popularity ratings. And this technique was used by Michael Moore in Fahrenheit 9/11. In that documentary, he took pictures of Bush shaking hands with Saudis to make the argument that if George Bush shook hands with a bunch of people from Saudi Arabia, that clearly he must be for big oil. Same technique was used in 2008. It was basically by the Obama campaign linking George Bush to John McCain. If you see pictures of them together, clearly they must have the same issue positions. That's what this piece tries to do. Okay, we'll do two more here. This one, again, now we're talking, again, this is from the Republicans, this one talking about specifics of Ron Barber. That's right. In this particular piece, it is an issue. This is what campaigns are supposed to do. Outline where the other candidate stands, outline where you stand on an issue, and attack. Obamacare has been the phrase used to resonate negativity among the health care plan that was passed. And this is what this piece does. Resonate that if you didn't like Obamacare, then you wouldn't want to vote for Ron Barber. Okay, and our final piece, it's another comparison piece again. What do you see here? So this one says Ron Barber and Pelosi are two of a kind. This tries to do the same visual argument of placing Ron Barber with a not-so-popular figure, nationally speaking. I don't think that this mailer is going to be quite as effective as the other ones. The other ones use real pictures of the people. It's hard to contest the truth of a real picture. This pastes them on to cards, and incidentally, the cards don't really look alike, so visually I think this is not perhaps the most effective technique that could have been used. Again, visually it doesn't quite work, but that's the argument it's trying to make. All right, well, thank you so much for coming in. For all of our viewers, if you want to see these ads and see these mailers, you can go to our website. We'll have them all there. Thanks so much for sitting down with us. Thank you for having me.
Coming up, Neil Ferguson wonders who will reign over the next millennium, the East or the West.
The West faces unprecedented challenges. Is this the end of Western civilization?
Civilization.
Tonight at 8 on PBS HD, Arizona Public Media.
The economy is the top concern for many voters around the country, but other issues are also very relevant in different states, and transportation is one of them in Arizona. Next, Michael Chihak tells us about the importance of Arizona's Highway User Revenue Fund, or HURF, which is used to tackle issues like road building and maintenance.
How are Arizona cities and towns doing at filling those potholes?
It's a challenge. Streets and roads are one of the basic essential services and one that certainly commands a lot of our municipal budgets and is very high priority for citizens. But it's been tough in the downturn of the economy with local revenues going down as well as sweeps of the HURF funds from the state. So I think the maintenance backlog, the improvements, preservation, those kinds of things have taken a back seat in many communities.
What has the HURF sweep done to cities and towns in Arizona?
Well, it's really created a lot of delay in what people can do with their road maintenance program. It's a very complex system to be maintaining asphalt and all the intersections and street lights and all those kinds of things. And so municipalities, as well as the state, have a very organized system for what they want to do in the maintenance schedules that they're on. And in general, the response, because of the HURF sweeps and because of declines in local revenues, has just been to simply delay those things. It's not that they don't need to be done, but when there's no money to actually pay for them in this year, then you push them off another year, another 2 years, and then that leads to increasing deterioration on the infrastructure.
And in total, what have those sweeps cost the cities and towns in Arizona over the last decade or so? Over the last decade, just for the city and town portion of HURF that should have come through the state, we've lost over $200 million in a 10-year period. And of course, that's distributed primarily on a population basis. There's a little difference in the formula for cities over 300,000, but in general, it's a population distribution for the cities and also for the counties in terms of how much gasoline sales are done. So it's been particularly hard in both urban and rural areas of the state. And do you know what the figure is for the state budget that was just passed for the coming fiscal year? For this year, the sweeps out of HURF are about $120 million, and that's going to DPS. And that, again, is a constitutional provision. The Constitution says that administration of the highway system and enforcement can be used with gasoline tax revenue, so that is a constitutional distribution. The $86 million that was transferred last year that went to the Motor Vehicles Department, we had some serious questions about whether that actually was a constitutional purpose, but fortunately this year that money was not taken out of HURF, and so we're not having to deal with that question this year. And how do you see the issue going forward? Do you expect these sweeps to continue? Do we need some other kind of adjustment to make sure they don't continue? I think there's only one thing that the legislature hates more than not having enough money, and that is raising taxes. And so I don't foresee the day that they're going to say, well, we need more revenue, therefore let's increase taxes in order to pay for the things that we want. So I think there will always be a temptation to try to move funds from one account to another. And when there's constitutional permission to do so, I think that they will likely take advantage of that. And that puts more pressure on cities and towns, though, to consider whether they should raise taxes or readjust their priorities. Is that not correct? That's always correct. And you know, HURF is very critical to the budgets of cities and towns when it comes to street maintenance. Now, not all cities and towns have 100% of their budgets for the streets coming from HURF. A lot of them supplement that with their own general revenue, and that's something that they decide on a city-by-city basis. So what is the general state of roads and streets in Arizona's cities and towns? I think it's fair to say that it's tolerable for the moment, but I think, as I mentioned earlier, the delay and the deference of maintenance, particularly, is going to be something that we're going to have to face in the future, and we'll likely see road conditions get worse before they get better. I just heard a presentation from an ADOT representative recently, and he was saying that they would normally do one kind of a restoration where they would grind down the street and replace the asphalt, but because of funding, they're not being able to do that. They have to do a chip seal or some other kind of interim step just to be able to preserve that surface for another year or two, and then hopefully at the end of that period of time they'll be able to do the comprehensive repair. The conditions of roads and streets are
obvious to everybody because we're out there all the time. So the prioritization of that, you mentioned it's a high priority for municipal governments. Where is it in the grander scheme of things? Ranks ahead of many things, behind perhaps public safety?
Yeah, I'd say in general it's in the top 5 or 6 municipal issues when you talk about basic utilities, water and sewer and garbage, those kinds of things, very high priority, but also transportation of all kinds, but especially streets and roads is something that always shows up in surveys as being very, very important, not only to citizens, just to average residents, but also to business. Because they talk about being able to move their goods and services from location to location, and then when they decide to put a manufacturing facility or some other distribution facility in place, how they can move their products is one of the important factors that they consider.
There was a bill in the legislature this past session, HB 2771, that would have made some fairly fundamental changes in the way HERF operates, but it didn't get passed. It didn't even get out of committee. And you testified in favor of that bill. Tell us a little bit about what that would have done, and then going forward, is that the kind of thing we need to be looking at?
I definitely think that's the kind of thing we need to be looking at, and that was a bill that was championed by Representative Vic Williams, who was chairman of the House Transportation Committee. This bill would have stopped the sweeps going forward, and at one point there was even an attempt to try to repay some of the sweeps that had been taken in past years. I think given, again, our budget situation, that's very unlikely to happen, but it's certainly something that I think legislators need to be confronted with and realize when the public is filling their gas tank, they're expecting that 18 cents worth of gas tax is going to pay for the streets and roads. It's a user fee, and to have it be diverted to other uses is really inappropriate.
Native American gaming operations have been in existence in Arizona since the 1990s, and tonight we take a look at their economic contributions to the state treasury. This segment comes to us from KAET, our sister television station in Phoenix.
The amount of money that the state gets from tribal gaming operations is on the rise, and here with the numbers is Mark Bernovich. He's director of the Arizona Department of Gaming. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ted.
All right, how much this tribal gaming, how much do these contributions contribute to the state?
Well, cumulatively, since the gaming compacts were originally passed by the voters in 2002, the number is about $700 million. But during this last fiscal year, the numbers, last fiscal year was $78 million, and we will exceed that when this fiscal year ends on June 30th. So the numbers are up.
Latest quarter sounds like the numbers are up as well, year to year, correct?
They are. Year-to-year numbers about 7.4%, and this is actually the 7th consecutive quarter of increases. And so the revenues had bottomed out and really kind of troughed out about 2008 through middle of 2010, and now we've seen steady increases, slight increases, but steady increases.
Is that an economic indicator that things are doing a little better out there for everyone so they can go head on to the casino?
Well, I think we generally accept that gambling is done with discretionary income in Indian country. Folks visit Indian casinos and it's with their discretionary dollars. And so when you see these increases, it means I think people are feeling more confident about the economy and they have more money to spend and they're willing to spend it at the tribal gaming facilities.
Okay, all this money, where does it go?
Well, the Arizona Department of Gaming administers the Arizona Benefits Fund, and the tribes are required by the gaming compacts to contribute between 1% and 8% of their net gaming revenue to the benefits fund. That benefit fund, the money goes to everything from the Educational Improvement Fund, the Emergency Services and Trauma Fund, the Wildlife Fund, and the Tourism Fund, as well as funding the Department of Gaming. Our entire budget is funded through gaming revenue.
I was going to say, it looks like $12 million this last quarter, I believe. $12 million. Is this the last quarter number?
That is the last quarter.
$12 million for education, $6 million for trauma and emergency services, $2 million for gaming, for your operations, I should say, the gaming department. conservation 1.7, and for treatment and education and programs for problem gambling, there's some like $500,000, something like
right.
that.
Our office does administer the Office of Problem Gambling is located within the Department of Gaming, and obviously there are social costs associated with gambling, and it's something that we try to address through the Office of Problem Gambling. There's a 1-800 helpline, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, which is available for problem gamblers.
Have you seen that being used as much? Because when this first started, a lot of folks were concerned about that. Have you seen the people using this as much as maybe they had thought they would earlier? What are you seeing?
Well, what we've seen within the department is that lately there has been an increase of the number of folks that have reached out for treatment to deal with problem gambling. Now, there's always that question. Is that because more information is being provided and there's more service providers, especially when gaming first started? When it first started up here, even a decade ago, there weren't a lot of treatment providers, and so we're seeing more treatment providers and more opportunities for treatment. So is it a chicken and egg thing? Are more people aware of it, so they're getting into treatment, or is it because there's more problem gamblers?
What are you seeing as far as revenue now as opposed to when the tribal casinos first started up? Obviously, during the boom years there in the mid 5, 6, 7 years ago or something like that, I'm guessing they were pretty high.
They are. We still have not reached the numbers that were there in 2006, 2007, 2008. Those numbers were tribal gaming revenues were really, really high. But like as I said earlier, we are starting to inch back up, and we are starting to slowly get back there. Now, of course, the question also is that what happens with the economy, not only here but worldwide. You see what's going on in Greece, and are they going to default, and Spain, and so what impact does that have? What impact does the expiration of the tax cuts have? So I think we need to wait and see whether we're fully out of this. This is one of these we slowly started creeping out of this recession, and the question is, will this economic recovery continue or not? And obviously, if it doesn't recover, it'll affect a lot of people, including gaming revenue.
Last question. I know these numbers are based, you said 1 to 8% of Class 3 revenue goes to the state and cities and towns and such. What is Class 3 gaming revenue?
Class 3 gaming revenue is essentially the casino revenue, casino games, the slot machines, the blackjack, the bank poker games. That's Class 3 gaming. Class 2, and this goes back to the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. It created these distinctions. Class 2 is essentially bingo and bingo-like games.
All right, very good. So the numbers are up, and they look to have been up for what, seven straight quarters?
7 consecutive quarters.
My goodness. All right, good to have the numbers. Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you very much.
You can get more news and information on our website, azpm.org. To comment on any story you saw tonight, click on it online and go to the bottom. We can also be reached via Facebook and Twitter. Coming up tomorrow night, we'll talk about the ongoing demographic changes in the United States and what they might mean for the future. And illegal immigration is said to be down along the U.S.-Mexico border. What's next in this ongoing controversial subject? I'm Tony Paniagua. Have a great night.